Nestled down the side of one of Shropshire's most iconic natural landmarks sits a rather interesting little relic of military history. These days, this field at the base of the Wrekin is rather serene and peaceful, but for over a century the sound of gunfire regularly echoed across this landscape, as originally this was the firing range for the King's Shropshire Light Infantry. Many of the men who trained here would go on to serve with distinction in the Anglo-Egyptian War, the Second Boer War, as well as both World Wars. At first glance, there doesn't really seem to be much here. The most obvious relic is the dilapidated hut near the road, which served as the office and magazine when the site was in use. But there are some more intriguing features once you start looking around. And the most interesting part is probably right down the far end of the range, but we'll get to that. Starting at the hut, there's not much to see beyond the crumbling, graffiti-laden walls which has ivy encroaching through all the gaps and all the windows. And as I visited in the midst of a heat wave, the view through this formal window looked rather more like a painting. The rather more collapsed structure next door was certainly worth a look as well, as it contains a rather interesting detail. This concrete block. And I do love a concrete block, because it usually means there was something there. And this particular concrete block served as a mount for a machine gun. Onto the range itself, at one point it would have extended all the way across the road for about 900 yards. Local bylaws gave the MOD permission to close the road and paths around the site, and anyone that was found in contravention of those closures would be fined the princely sum of £5. In later years, the range was shortened to just 300 yards, and the firing banks are not only still visible, but they also contain the foxholes of the firing positions. The best preserved feature though is just beyond this bank at the end of the range, as this is the target gallery. And it's still remarkably intact, with 12 Hythe pattern target frames where operators would raise and lower targets, and they could use a pointing stick to indicate where the shots had actually hit the target. That helped the marksmen adjust their aim without people having to run up and down the range. Apparently it was also quite common for the shooters to try and shoot that pointy stick as well to give the operators a bit of a shock. Something that would probably be frowned on if it happened today. The gallery is in good nick and is apparently one of the most well-preserved ranges of its type. Though, a word of caution, there are large nails sticking out of the concrete, and I nearly went full Alan Partridge after stepping onto one concealed in the leaf litter.
What? Lil, I've pierced my foot on a spike!
The site was also used by the Shropshire Yeomanry, who were originally a volunteer force for home defence. Members of that regiment also fought in the Second Boer War and both World Wars. By the 1930s, the Territorial Army were using the range, and in the 1940s, the Home Guard trained here, presumably with all the Dad's Army-esque associated antics.
Your name will also go on the list. What is it? Don't tell him, Pike. Pike.
In later years, it was also used by cadets and the local rifle club. The site ultimately stopped being used in the 1980s, though some TA members do recall still practising here until the early 90s. The main reason for the shutdown was apparently despite sentries, red flags, sounds of gunfire and the threat of being fined £5 was apparently not enough to stop local walkers and cyclists from casually wandering onto the range. And with the MOD gone, the civilian club didn't have the authority or the ability to close the roads and paths. If you're passing through the area, you can actually get a good look at the gallery from the footpath that runs right next to it, quite safely without the risk of needing a tetanus jab. The site is classed as a scheduled monument, and the gallery itself is a Grade 2 listed structure. Of course, if you've got any stories or memories of training here, I would love to hear about them in the comments below. Thanks for watching.